Hello everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be answering the questions which you guys have sent me over the last month or so. Amazing questions, by the way. Questions on persuasion, questions on influence, questions on if the media brainwashes us, questions on how cults use influence and persuasion to get you to do their bidding, all sorts of amazing questions. I can see from the feedback that you guys give, you actually really like these longer form Q&As, and I think it's because it allows me to speak with kind of unfiltered thoughts on subjects which you find interesting. Before we jump into the Q&A though, if you don't know what this channel is about, my name is Rob. Businesses hire me so I can help them with persuasion and psychology. But a good part of what I do for business is understanding all the different natures of persuasion, and it allows me to be very good at spotting when, dark psychology is being used or manipulation techniques as well, which is why I do the reaction videos on the side. But today's video is about a Q&A, so let's get straight to the questions. Does the media brainwash you? Is question number one. Heavy question, but let's try and tackle it. I would say yes and no. So I would say the media's intention is to just get views because that is what drives their revenue. That's what gets them money. I would say as almost a second cause, they end up brainwashing people by accident, but I don't think it's their intention. So hear me out on this. So a few years ago, I was watching a Netflix documentary, and on this Netflix documentary, it was covering murders which happened in England in about the 1980s and 1990s. And basically there was this scene in it where police and the media were all sat down together and they were trying to work out how they can alert the public to the danger, because they've not caught the killer yet, and the serial killer is just killing more and more people, right? And there was this scene in it where the media were basically like, we need to report on this because we need to warn the public, but we don't want to, and this is their exact words, we don't want to report on it in the morning, because these murders were all happening, at the nighttime. We don't want to report on it when everyone's having their breakfast, because if we do, it will put everyone off the breakfast. That is exactly the words of the media in 1990. And so they were deliberately trying to not cause any outrage, right? They were deliberately trying to be as soft and as sensitive to the public as possible. But fast forward to today, particularly in the last few years, the media is doing everything possible to incite the crowds, to cause the outrage, to get everyone really, really angry at each other. Now, what's changed? Is it that the media has become a propaganda and brainwashing machine? Potentially, but I think what's more likely is that there is more competition these days. So if you think about it, in 1980 and 1990, if you were going to watch the news, you would either be watching on a TV, which has limited channels, or you'd be listening on the radio. And generally, every single day, there would be about 2 slots where the news could speak to you, the media could speak to you. And in those 2 slots, if you were watching the TV or listening to the radio, they would have your full attention. Right? There's no phone to distract you. There's only a very select few channels. There's only a few media sources, which means the media which comes out is likely actually quite important, because they're going to just report on the actual crazy things which are happening. So they would have your full attention during those time slots, right? So there's no need to try and do all these attention grabbing things, because they already have your attention. But fast forward throughout the years, let's get to 2010, there's lots of different news sources now, and they all have to compete for attention. And so what do? They get more outrageous. They understand that they've now got to compete for your attention. Fast forward to 2020, we now got mobile phones with reels, high dopamine reels. Reels and TikToks, which are so potent that Netflix actually started to lose a little bit of revenue, basically, and the theory was they were losing it because most people were just more interested in scrolling on their phone than actually watching Netflix shows. Okay, so what does the media have to do now? They have to cause crazy outrage just so you watch it. And what is a byproduct of causing outrage is people getting very angry and working themselves up and believe in whatever is being shown to them because it's such an outrageous message. And then what happens is we now have algorithms as well which track your behavior. The algorithm knows that you've spent a lot of time watching this reel on why Donald Trump is the worst ever person, why he's similar to Hitler. And then what happens is some people who are very susceptible to brainwashing, who are very suggestible, right, in psychology and in hypnotherapy, if they are highly suggestible, they would then basically be brainwashed into doing some sort of crazy thing, such as attempting to assassinate Donald Trump, right? So let's break that down a little bit. The intention, here's my belief, wasn't to brainwash you, but what happened was it was the same outcome as to brainwash you. And we end up as well, thanks to social media, in echo chambers of our own beliefs. So it's quite widely reported now, like I use America because it's different over here in the UK, but I use America because it's very divided on left and right. If you are a person who kind of leans right, you will see lots of right content due to the algorithms, which basically tell you what you are already believing. So it works into that confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is a bias where we see things that match our beliefs, right? So if I think that everyone is a horrible human being, I will only in my head look for examples and focus on examples where people are horrible to me, and I will just, due to my subconscious psychology, will ignore the people who are actually nice to me. So what happens is, if you think, I'm a right-leaning person, you will see things from the left side on the media and focus on the media due to the algorithm and due to your own confirmation bias as well, that make you very, very angry and push you even further into the right side there. And what happens because of this? There are a select number of individuals, as I just said, who will end up heavily brainwashed, who cannot take on any other side. So I think the advice for this is exactly the same. Does the media intentionally brainwash you? No. Does the media brainwash you? Yes, I would say. So my opinion is that you don't watch media, you don't watch any news. There's evidence out there that for people who do constantly watch the news, constantly watch the media, it drives up their anxiety. They have a higher baseline of anxiety compared to those people who don't. But then as well, you are getting truths which are only shown to you, which are distorted through the algorithm, through an echo chamber which your algorithm has created based on your own beliefs. I don't personally watch the news. I know how much damage it can do and how much it can kind of hack your brain. Imagine you're trying to accomplish big things and you're spending all day getting worked up over some article or some video that you saw about the news earlier yesterday, and it's taking up all of your brain, and that thing isn't even that true. It's looking through a specific lens and focusing on specific details. So I don't think it's a good idea to watch the media. That's not what you asked. You've asked, does the media brainwash you? Intentionally, no, I would say. It's just all for money. That's its North Star. But it is by accident brainwashing you. Long-winded answer, but I hope that makes sense. Question number 2. A lot of influencers use authority to help them sell products. What is authority bias and how does it work? So authority bias is the theory that we look to people who are either experts or authority figures, and we become very compliant basically when they're around. So if an authority figure or an expert asks us to do a particular action, then we would just comply with them compared to a regular person asking us to do this. And this has been proved in studies again and again and again. And I think this is actually a great video that I can do later on my YouTube channel. There was a famous experiment years ago, and this has been shown in multiple different experiments. There is a very famous one years ago in the 1960s by a guy called Milgram. And what Milgram did was basically see if he could get an authority figure to give commands to a participant, a random person they've pulled off the street who they've psychologically evaluated as a normal person. They've basically studied if they could get that authority figure to kill a different human being. And they predicted that the commands that the authority figure would give would be non-effective, meaning that if a authority figure told you as an individual that you have to administer a certain level of electric shocks to another human being, you wouldn't do it if you judged it was too dangerous and it might actually put that other human being in danger. That's what they predicted. They predicted hardly anyone would do that. What they actually found was over 60% of people under the influence of an authority figure, just giving you basic commands, would actually administer fatal level shocks to another human being. And of course it was all an experiment, but the people who were involved in the experiment didn't know it was an experiment. They didn't know what was being tested there. So this caused all sorts of other studies about basically how important and how potent authority was when it came to giving commands to another person. I'll make a full video on that on a different part of my YouTube channel. But you can basically use authority bias in all of your marketing, all of your persuasion. So for instance, if you're trying to sell a make money online course and you have a Ferrari in the background or a Lamborghini like in Tai Lopez's advert, that is establishing authority, right? You know he's probably an expert on that subject. So what happens is because now you view him as an expert on the subject, and because humans generally have this tendency to comply with authority figures and do what they say, you are more likely to now click through onto the links he sends, buy his courses or whatever, because authority bias is working very much on you. And remember, right, everyone can sit here and watch this video and say, yeah, well, it wouldn't work on me. Yeah, you know, I don't think that really works. But the experiments and the studies show that is actually not the case. And when people afterwards in the experiments are confronted why, hey, this is why we think you did the action of X, Y, and Z, right? It's because of an authority figure. They will often deny it and say, no, it was their own choice to do that. And they felt just compelled to do that. So people can't tell when they're being influenced. Now, I gave the example there of how it can be used in the marketing of a make money online course, but truthfully, it can be used in any sort of arena. You know, the news, the media, they are established as an authority on the subject. There's a lot of people out there who believe that when they get information from the news, from the media, they aren't trying to cause outrage and that facts are just actually being reported. There is, you know, if you are working in a career and you have a boss ask you to do something, you are more likely to comply with that boss because they have the expertise, they have the authority, right? So here's a point for you. I would say work on areas where you can build your own authority up. And you can do this by pursuing areas of interest. I've built up my authority because I'm very, very interested in persuasion and psychology. And, you know, I know a lot about it. And then companies have hired me to help them with it as well. And I do this because I'm interested in it. So think to yourself, what areas am I interested in which I find that I continually read about, right? Because that is the easiest way for you to build up your own authority. Okay, so I hope that answers your question there. So here's another question. You get a lot of hateful comments on your breakdowns of Andrew Tate's Persuasion. Why do you think that is? Very true. So when I make a video, a reaction video, where I break down the persuasion and influence of a controversial figure, I find that some of the comments are indeed, you know, against what I'm saying, right? And it's for a few different reasons. So I made one video on Andrew Tate and something really interesting happened. I got one guy who commented, I can't believe you're condemning Andrew Tate like this. He was just like insulting me. And he was essentially saying that I was very, very biased in my review and how he's just a great guy and everything. And that was one comment I got on that video. I then opened up my LinkedIn. I had a DM on my LinkedIn from a person who's been following me for a while. And this person said, I can't believe you are talking about figures like Andrew Tate. I've unsubscribed from your YouTube channel because Andrew Tate's a terrible human being. And I found that really interesting. And I found it interesting because I was like, these two people have watched the same YouTube video, but they both have completely opposite perceptions on what was happening. One person was disgusted because they thought I was supporting Andrew Tate. The other person was disgusted because they thought I was condemning Andrew Tate, but they both watched the same video. So there is something called confirmation bias. And what happens with confirmation bias, particularly with public figures that we like, we have a tendency to make an assessment about a public figure or a person that we watch, and they fall into either two categories. We either like them or we don't like them. And this is called the likability bias. If we like someone, we have a tendency to ignore all the bad things they do. If we don't like someone, we have a tendency to ignore all the good things that they do. And this has been proven again in studies, right? They've studied convicts who are going through sentencing, and basically the less likable a convict is, the longer prison sentence they get, right? Which nobody seems to talk about. The less likable they are, the longer the prison sentence they'll get for the same crime as the likable person. So this means that when we have a viewer who has a particular view on Andrew Tate, they will judge my commentary as either good or bad, or supportive or not supportive, based on their own view of him. But they can't tell that's what's going on. And that is so interesting. They have this pre-belief about the person, and because of this, they are basically blind to things which are against their view, right? Because that's the only thing which is standing out to them. And this can affect people all the way through life. I've got a friend, he's a very smart friend, right? He's high IQ, but I would say if he lived in America, his beliefs lean left. You know, he hates Donald Trump, he hates money, he hates things which aren't PC, he hates Musk as well, Elon Musk. And it's very, very strange because I remember he came to me once and he was just ranting about some news that he's been watching. Remember, news drives up your anxiety. He was ranting about it, and he was ranting about Elon Musk, right? And he said some things, but I'd read Elon Musk's book at this point, and I was like, actually, what you said there, it wasn't correct. That's not what actually happened. And we went back and forth on this topic a few times. I was just like, what you're saying, like, is not true. And what happened was my friend didn't speak to me for about 2 months until I bumped into him. No text messages whatsoever, which was odd for him. And what I thought was going on was it was like an ego thing, and that I corrected him on a topic which he thought he knew the answer to. But what was actually going on only came out when I happened to bump into him a few months later. We were out having a drink. It was like a big group of us. And he came over to me. And he was like, you know what, man? He was like, I can't believe you love figures like Elon Musk and Donald Trump because they've done X, Y, and Z. And I know you don't support that, right? And I said to him, what do you mean I love figures like Elon Musk and Donald Trump? And he was like, I know that you love this about them. I know that you support this about them and blah, 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 blah. I was like, I've not said any of those things. But what's happened was he has basically, through his own lens of his mind, from me correcting him on the Elon Musk thing, he has interpreted that correction as I am in support of that person because he hates them, right? I was on the fence. I was just like, hey, this is what I think. This is what I have seen from the book. That's actually untrue, right? But he has interpreted that as me defending him and that I'm actually in support of him. And this is a very smart guy, by the way, because he's made all these interpretations based off of his own beliefs on that. And then afterwards, he's got really riled up by it, and he's thought of other things I've said that are in support of, and that I really love these guys. But basically, he hates those guys. So he's viewed anything which is counter to that belief as love. Very, very interesting. And it was so powerful that he didn't speak to me. My own friend didn't speak to me for a while. And I thought it was ego, but when we came down to it, I was like, oh, actually, it's this which he has got a problem with. He thinks I love these guys, and he doesn't align with that, right? So he didn't speak to me for a little while. Very, very interesting. So my point with this is nothing's as it seems, really. You can't have too strong beliefs on anything, because what happens is it clouds your judgment on things on things like that, right? Imagine that was a business scenario and basically this guy's just lost business because he's wrongly interpreted my actions. He's wrongly interpreted what my stance on things because of his own bias. And I think we live in a world at the moment where if you are neutral on a topic, you are viewed as weak. But really, you should be neutral on a topic and you should sit on the fence until you have enough information. And information is like the thing which is gonna power your decisions, right? So if you look at organizations, FBI, CIA, MI5, MI6, they don't act on information until they know the full picture. Imagine that they would make a quick decision based on their initial thoughts. But what I'm trying to say from this is be objective. Like, don't just take anything at face value. Don't just take the beliefs. Think for yourself, right? Because it's very interesting as well, living in this world where the media controls kind of the information which we see in that. But everyone who's picked a side thinks they're the only one that's being objective, but they're not the one who's being objective. If we look at like the red pill world at the moment, you've got the red pill guys and you've got the, I think it's blue pill guys, and they have completely counter beliefs to each other in terms of like relationships. But if you look into both of their beliefs, they think they're being objective based on the information they know, but they have their own biases, right? So truthfully, it's probably somewhere a bit more in the middle, but both of them are blind to the other side's arguments. They only can argue their side. They don't even answer the other side. So interesting stuff. Next question. What's one of the best ways to persuade yourself into being more productive? So I made a whole video on this actually, but a good technique to persuade yourself into being more productive is something called the Zeigarnik effect. And what the Zeigarnik effect is that humans basically hate uncompleted things, unfinished things. They need to see the ending, the outcome. They need to see where the loop is closed. So if I was to tell you a story and stop halfway through that story, you'd probably be a little bit frustrated. You'd be like, I want to hear the end of the story, right? Even if you weren't that invested in it. If you get halfway through a TV episode, it's painful to switch it off without actually seeing the outcome of the TV episode. And shows know this, the media knows this, which is why they leave things on cliffhangers, because humans need to see the end of the story. This is the Zeigarnik effect in action. But to make yourself more productive, you can actually use this effect on yourself. So here's what I would say is if you are doing some work, recording some video, making some content, leave halfway through or finish your working day halfway through something. Don't finish the thing, whatever you're working on. Most people think, I'm just going to get to the end of X, Y, and Z, and then I'll stop for the day because I'll feel like I've done a good job if I just get to the end of X, Y, Z. Don't do that. Actually, instead, leave halfway through that. Finish your working day halfway through what you're doing. That causes the Zeigarnik effect to activate. What happens is it keeps the thing which is incomplete front of mind. So you'll be working on all night in a part of your brain, oh, what is the end to this sentence? What else should I say in this video? So it's a great way to then, when you come back to start work again, your brain is straight into it because it needs to close the loop. It's a little psychology hack for you there. I will just talk to you a little bit about identity. People who are very effective and very productive and can get things done to big sort of levels view themselves as that person. Even if they're a little bit lazy and find, shortcuts and things to take, they still view themselves as a person who completes, who is effective, who is a person who just gets things done. I view myself as a person who does that. And so a part of how you perform is due to the identity, and your identity is basically how you view yourself. So if you want to be a little bit more productive, focus on changing your identity. Start working out, just journal in the morning, work out what little stories and scripts you're running in your brain, what stories you're telling yourself. What is the story? Are you telling yourself, I'm such a lazy person? Are you telling yourself, all I do is procrastinate till the end of time? Or are you telling yourself, hey, look, I'm a person who, I have a video that's due out every single week. And so I make sure that video's out. It doesn't matter what else happens, right? I will find time to make that happen because that's just the type of person I am. Identity is a very, very powerful thing. Identity is the reason people get into cults, which is actually one of the questions coming up, because there is usually a group identity when a person's in a cult. And that's obviously a highly dark psychology trick of encouraging people to get into cults, but this can be used on yourself. All these persuasion techniques are very effective to be used on yourself, to get yourself to do things, to get yourself to overcome the challenges which you're facing. Okay, so next up we have, do you think Hamza is a cult leader? Because he describes himself as a cult leader and his followers are very young and they seem to be being manipulated. So I don't know Hamza too much. I've seen some of his content, but to be honest with you, I should do an analysis on it actually. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do an analysis on Hamza. So it's unfair for me to completely comment on Hamza's situation, but what I will comment on is the bit which you said about cults there. If you look at cults, and I watched an amazing program, I'll try and find what it's called, but basically, if you look at cults and how people get invested in cults, people who join cults are usually a little bit vulnerable at some point. Now, vulnerability can be defined by a person who has mental health problems, but there's also a lot of other things which make a person vulnerable. If a person's deaf, they are, a vulnerable person. If a person doesn't have any social support networks, they are a vulnerable person. If a person has just had a bereavement or they've got a serious family issue going on, they are technically considered as more of a vulnerable person. And I think vulnerability in this day and age is defined as like, you've got one side which are like, just be vulnerable, be very open. Then you've got the other side of like, vulnerability is a weakness, men shouldn't feel feelings. But truth be told, the science shows that it doesn't matter what type of person you are, vulnerability doesn't have to be an identity. Vulnerability can be something you go through. We're all human. We'll all have human parents or human family. We are all at some point going to lose someone who's close to us, which would, by definition, make us a little bit more vulnerable, even if you can't see it, right? So cult leaders usually find vulnerable people and they find them at exactly the right time in their life, or they draw people out. They're usually people with very, very high certainty. They are great extroverted speakers who use repetition and speaking with absolute confidence to explore and exploit the person's vulnerabilities and insecurities. And they do it in a way which creates a common enemy. They do it in a way which unites people under a common goal, and they are maybe the only person which either gives their audience, their viewers, tough love, or show them real affection and show them truths, right? Different truths. And they do this and it ends up getting into the person's brain. Now, remember what I said earlier as well. There are some people who aren't that vulnerable who join cults, some very, very smart people. So these type of tactics can work on everyone. Most people cannot tell they're being influenced. I opened an email on, I just ignore all the emails that come through my Gmail, but I opened one the other day and I immediately opened it, read it through, and it was asking me to go to a survey, and I filled it out. And afterwards I was like, whoa, what just happened here in this email? And I looked back through the email and I analysed it, and it had all sorts of different psychology going on in it. It had urgency, it had very confident techniques in it, it had authority in it, it had social proof. And the email was only a few lines long, and I read through it and I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, it absolutely just caused me to take action on something which I never usually do. So my point is I've got years and years of experience in persuasion. I have a vault with hundreds and hundreds of pages, all detailing different persuasion experiments where certain persuasion principles are more effective. studied, cults and things like this, and it's all because I like behavioral science. But basically, a person who can spot things and as well trained as even me has a slight hole in their security, which something gets through, right? And I could not tell that was happening while it was happening, but only afterwards I threw on the brakes and was like, what the hell just happened here? Email caused me to take action. So smart people, well-informed people, people who aren't vulnerable can also end up being in a cult as well, or getting dragged into a cult. Doesn't mean they are the most likely type of people to be brought into it. It's actually vulnerable people, but it's not always the case. And if you try and argue with people on their beliefs, as I was talking about before, that they are being persuaded or that they are being attempted to join a cult, usually they will get super defensive. Usually they will think you're the biased one because they just cannot see it. They're too under the influence. They have to be awakened to what they're seeing, their manipulation themselves. They have to have their eyes open to themselves. And so rather than telling someone, you have to lead them to the truths, show them the contradictions. I've just kind of answered the question there, how do you get someone out of a cult? But it's all very interesting. All right. Next question. How do you predict someone's behavior? So I did a quick YouTube short with Robert Greene recently. And on this, Robert Greene was talking about how humans work in basically patterns. And if you are getting into a relationship with someone and every person that they have been with previously, they have split up with because all their partners were really angry and really dramatic, that could be the case, but likely it is something they've done. So look for the red flags in human behavior. And I think looking at human patterns and seeing how they've previously acted in situations is one of the best ways to read human behavior. So look at a person's past to predict their future. If a person is a continuous liar, right? They lie and lie and lie and lie. Are they likely to be telling you the truth? Probably not. They're probably more Machiavellian, right? If you are getting into business with a person who has previously ripped off people, but they insist they've changed, are they likely to rip you off given the opportunity going forward? Yes. And it works for personal relationships as well. I notice that some of my friends, if they are very, very flaky and they have a history of being flaky, saying they're going to come to something, but then backing out the last minute, cancelling the last minute, suddenly on the day they've organized to do something, they don't respond to any texts. If they've got a history of doing that, they don't change. And that's controversial. Humans don't change as much as we like to believe we change. We are stuck in our own patterns, and it takes a lot of force and a lot of actual conscious effort, I believe, on the person's part to change their own behavior. So if I've seen a person who has a history of being super flaky, backing out, even on like a friend level, I will notice that like most times they back out. Me and my fiance a few years ago, we got engaged and we had an engagement party. And for an engagement party, you've got to invite people who you consider good friends, good family, right? And the problem is that it costs money to book people at a venue. So say if you've got like 60 people going, you have to say to the venue that you're booking, I've got 60 people going, or 100 or whatever. You've got to say like the numbers to the venue, and then they charge you based on those numbers. And then we had the challenge of, it's like a few of these people that we want to come and that have said they'll come or even invited themselves are very, very flaky people. And we've got a feeling like these guys wouldn't come. So what we did, me and my fiance, we got two lists. We had all the people that said they would come, and we created a number for that, 60 people. I can't remember how many it was, but like say 60 people. 60 people who said they're going to come to this. And then we had a second list. And on the second list, we had, here are the people that said they're going to come, minus the people who said they're going to come, but have a zero track record of being reliable. So what we did is we minused those people, and then it was like just 40 left, right? And on this second list that we kept, every single person which we predicted had a track record of being flaky or being unreliable, and we got rid of their names. All of those people didn't come. Right? All of them didn't come. And the reason is that people work in patterns. They have their past behavior. You just judge people by the past behavior. Have they acted previously? That's how they're most likely going to act in the future, right? So that's one of the best ways to judge a person's behavior. Read what they've previously done. Okay. Question here. You mentioned that you are going to release a persuasion course / community at some point. What's the deal with this? Yeah, so it's an idea, and I want to make sure that if I do something like that, it's going to land appropriately. So it's still in idea stage. I've got so much content, so many things I can go in detail on in a community. If I go in too much detail on a YouTube video, this video today is probably the highest level amount of detail that I go into on things. But the problem is, the more detail I go into, the more it attracts the common viewer, and then they don't watch very long. So the video doesn't get spread anywhere. So that's a challenge, right? And then as well, if I give some really good stuff out, we've also seen before that I've done a reaction video and then instantly a person with 500,000 subscribers, I've only got 1,000, instantly copied the video. So there's lots of challenges with talking about high level persuasion on a YouTube channel. So I think it's only right that I create some sort of persuasion course. But then I'm like, I have the challenge, and maybe you guys can offer suggestions for this. I have the challenge of where I'm thinking, do I talk about persuasion in terms of sales context? Do I talk about persuasion in terms of making yourself better, making you more productive? Do I talk about persuasion in terms of relationships? There's a million different angles on which you can educate yourself on persuasion. And I think based on that, a persuasion community will be better with like separate modules in. And the best way to do that seems to be through school, but it's still early days on this. I want to make sure that if I did something like this, it would be for the right people, it would solve the right problems, and it would be things which could actually make your life better. It would actually, push you forward in terms of life. Like things like, how do you meet friends? How do you get people to like you? How do you get people to trust you? That could be a module in it, right? Like almost like a networking persuasion module. How do you properly read people with government level predictions, right? How do you do these things? And that could all be in this community. So there's the idea. And I think that it will be something I do at some point. But I also want to make sure it's as valuable as possible and that it attracts the right people who are right for the program, which was still in the early stages. Like, how do I position all this? It's a plan in the future. And I think as well, having a community where people can talk with each other and talk about like the latest research, because everyone's got an opinion on things. There's a million YouTube videos as I scroll through my feed where everyone's got an opinion on something, right? But what's based on the actual science? What's based on the research? And that's kind of what I want to explore. What does the research say when it comes to persuasion and behavioral science and things like this? What does it actually say? How does it get amplified, right? How does it get minimized? How does a person walk into a room where they need to be charismatic, and how do they pull that off, right? So these are all good topics to cover, but I want to make sure it's good. So that's all I've got time for in terms of questions today. I do have a few more, but I'll save them for next time. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. Let me know if you got any questions or any comments on anything that I've covered so far. And take it easy. See you in the next one.